Are we running?
We are actually running, yeah. This is an actual video shoot.
Is it?
It is. You wouldn't think so, would you? Welcome to Obsession Engineering. Regular viewers might recognise Adam, who bought the yellow 748 off me and is, you know, my usual road test buddy. Adam has bought himself a new toy, and it is under this cover, and it is here because it may need a last little bit of fettling. So the idea for this build started a couple of years ago when we actually had a classic TT, and Adam thought it'd be great to go and do the parade lab. So he needed something from the 90s. And another friend of ours had something from the 90s, but it turns out they didn't actually quite have all of it. So instead of buying a complete bike, Adam's basically bought a bike in instalments pretty much every month for about 2 years.
Pretty much.
What was this, you know, an absolute bargain and, you know, by far cheaper than buying a complete bike?
Definitely not. It has cost quite a bit. It needed a few things. Some of those things cost quite a bit of money. Some of it was not so much money, but still it turned out to be a boatload of money. As we know, the BOAT acronym stands for bust out another 1,000. That was very true of this project.
So then, Adam, let's show the wonderful people out there on the internet what you've bought.
Dun, 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 dun. Shiny, shiny.
And then it starts to go a little downhill.
It does go a little, yeah, a little bit a lot. And there she is.
Lovely.
A little Honda RVF400. It's got some shiny bits on it and a lot of not so shiny bits on it, but we're going to make it shiny again and get it back out on the road.
So there are a few issues with starting off with most of a bike and having to buy a few bits. And when we say a few bits, this does include the engine, the yokes, the wiring loom, a full set of new bodywork, a back wheel, and quite a lot of other bits. Now the forks have already been refurbished. We've put new stanchions in and I've weighted them for Adam, so they are sprung a little firmer than original and they are lovely. The brake discs and brake pads are also new. The calipers definitely need a clean. Moving down this way, lovely new Chinese radiator. Not quite so lovely original Honda slightly bent top radiator, but it holds water, so it's not the end of the world. The frame is in decent condition. The rear sets, though, have a touch of patina to them, I think we'll call it. The back wheel is in nice order. The only problem is it doesn't match the paint on the front wheel, so the front wheel's going to get repainted to match the rear. The fuel tank looks nice, but it is quite rusty inside. There's lots of fasteners and bits holding things together that are just a little bit nah, so we'll be changing a load of those for stainless and making them look nice. And yeah, we're pretty much just going to take it apart, decide what needs to be done, write a bit of a list, and then make Adam pay even more money out. One of the first things we have is a paddock stand, but this is actually off the yellow Ducati. So, what we need to do is change this pin, and we haven't bought a pin. I'm just going to go in the machine shop out the back and machine a new one up that actually fits the Honda. While I'm away machining the pin for the paddock stand, Adam is going to take the brake calipers off the front of the bike because the brakes bind quite a lot and they're a little bit minging inside. So we're going to strip them down and see what the seals and the pistons and bits are like. So he is going to take these bolts out of here and he's going to take that nut off there and that banjo bolt, and when he takes that banjo bolt out, all the fluid will fall out. And normally this is a terrible problem. We're not greatly worried about the actual paint on the front wheel, so it's not as much of a problem today. The joys of having something that you know you're going to change. So I've popped down the back of the bike here so that I can measure this gap here, so I can get the pin for the paddock stand correct. And while I was down here, I thought, well, Adam may as well take the rear caliper off and service that while he's doing the front. And I found something a little odd. So, nice new brake line, nice new end for the brake line. Not quite sure what that copper washer's supposed to be doing. I think whoever put the brake line together put the copper washer on and then realised they didn't need it. I just think it's quite amusing that there's just one loose copper washer bouncing around on the end of a brake line. So while Adam's dribbling brake fluid everywhere, I get to come in here and play on the lathe. So I have a big piece of steel sticking out of the chuck, and then what I'm going to do is get the lathe to spin that round, move my cutting tool in, and obviously when this is spinning around at several hundred RPM, this very, very hard little thing will cut the material, and I can cut it down to the diameters I want. Nice and simple. Get the tool spinning, wind the tool in until it just touches. Right, so that's there. We'll wind out to that end, and then I'll set a cut, so we'll wind this in another, say that far. I can put the auto feed on, and then that'll rattle along there and cut some material off. Really is nice and simple. All you've got to do is keep measuring it to make sure you don't cut it too deep. Now that I have this diameter here correct to go in the swinging arm, and I've taken it out and checked it and it fits really nicely, what I need to do is cut the bar off down here where this mark is using a cut-off tool, which is like a thin cutting tool that will just slice into the bar. That'll cut that off, and then I can machine this end down so it fits correctly into the paddock stand. We now have a selection of brake calipers removed from a bike, and we have Adam in his lovely blue gloves. Smurf gloves to go with his orange overalls. Yes. So what we're going to do next is Adam's going to remove the little sort of locking bolt, the little retainer for the pads in the rear caliper. We did decide to do the rear at the same time, and then get an Allen key in there, 5mm, and undo the pad pin. So this is actually quite a lot easier with somebody else doing the work, isn't it? Because I can talk through it, and I don't have to be using both my hands.
And it makes a change that I'm not stood the other side of the camera.
It does actually, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is like, is this the new system now?
I wouldn't have thought so.
No.
Well, it can be if you want everything to take 2 or 3 times longer.
Okay, so we'll revert back to the old system once you've done your apprenticeship.
Yes, yes. Well, as we know, I am theoretical in my my knowledge, and practicality is what it's all about this week.
Right then. The first mistake Adam has made is by putting the brake calipers into the tray where we're going to end up with a load of brake fluid, so we want them out of the way.
I did that so you could point out the mistake to the viewers.
Why, thank you.
The viewer. Let me take the little pinage out.
Right, now we have a brake caliper with, as you can see down here, slightly corroded, unpleasant looking pistons. This bit, which is just like the plate so the caliper can slide on and off the disc, if Adam just gives that a pull, he should actually be able to pull that out. Or not. Right, okay, we can leave the carrier on for now.
So we'll leave that one on.
So the next step is to take this end off, and that is the end of the brake line. So we can take that off, partly because I don't think the copper washer is actually seated right. So we'll start by taking that off because we're going to change the copper washer anyway. Right, a bit more brake fluid falling out.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right, this is why we have a metal tray inside a plastic tray. Everything goes in the plastic tray, only the fluid, hopefully, will go in the metal tray. Right then, next thing is I'm going to don Adam with a pair of safety specs, and I'm going to get him to put the airline in here and blow.
Not the first time you said that.
Right.
Now, are these going to come rocketing out? Because that would be cool.
They might actually come out quite quickly, so if you point them towards the bench...
Yep.
Are they moving?
Whoa!
Yeah, so as we pointed out, if you point them away from you, it's always good, because you would not have want that pointed at your testes.
God, the bounce back almost got me in the Jacobs. That one's really stuck though.
Right, so what we can do now is we can give the actual piston a little bit of a polish with some Scotch-Brite or something to take any little marks off it. And then, with the caliper, what we're going to do is, in these little grooves down here, we're going to get a little pick, and we're going to pick the seals out and make sure there's no corrosion underneath. Right, so as you can see here, we've got the pick like poked down the front of the seal and then pushed underneath it to get the seal underneath the whole thing, and then it'll just pop out the hole. Just like that.
Like magic.
Lovely. Right, what we're going to do next is have a little bit of a clean out of the actual seal grooves. and make sure there's no corrosion. If there is a little bit of furring underneath there, we can just clean it out with a bit of Scotch-Brite or with the end of the pick. Make sure everything's tickety-boo, and if the seals look okay, we can put them back in. We've been getting the pick in there and just like cleaning up in the actual seal grooves, and there was a little bit of corrosion in there, but not too bad. So the next thing to do is check the seals, and if the seals look okay, we're going to smear them in red rubber grease, which is proper brake caliper grease, pop them back into the seals, and clean the piston up and slide it back in. We now have the seals refitted. They looked okay, so they've gone back in with a smear of red rubber grease on everything. And now we also have a piston that Adam is lightly fingering. We've covered that in red rubber grease, polished it first, it's all looking pretty good. So now he's going to attempt to slide that into there. It is a little bit of a case of they will only go in when they're sort of really, really straight. So it will take a little bit of persuasion to get it past the first seal.
There we go.
Right, and that just slides in quite nicely. And you can see we've put plenty of red rubber grease on, so it does smear some out the hole, but that does at least mean that we've got plenty of it around the bits where we want it. So that one's now in, which means we've got to get that one out, which might be a little bit fun and games. Right, so with the first piston back in, this one looked like it might be a little bit awkward to get out. So what we've just done now is given it a good squirt with some GT85 to give it a bit of lubrication, and with a big pair of pipe grips, and a little bit of rag on the back of the caliper, we've given it a squeeze so it pushes it back in, so there's like a bit of lube on the seals. So hopefully now, when Adam puts the airline on it, that one will pop out quite easily. Now, we do need to wedge this one in, so we're going to put a bit of bar in there to stop this one firing back out. Hopefully the second one will come out. There we go. That's piston number 2 out.
Ooh, there's a little bit of rust marks.
A little bit of corrosion mark in there that we can't really see very easily at the moment, but
I could see it fine.
That'll do then. Well, you're the one cleaning it out. So, while Adam's cleaning the seals up and putting that one back together, I'm going to go back in the machine shop and finish the paddock stand pin. So this is my new paddock stand pin. At this end, I've machined a bit of a groove so that when we slide it through the bearings, I can put a circlip on it to retain it, and that end has a thread in it, so that I can actually put a bolt or a piece of stud bar from the wheel nut side all the way through to hold the bike onto the paddock stand. So then if we have it running or anything, it can't try and work its way off the paddock stand, which is always a bonus. So I'll pop that in there, and then we can actually get the bike on a stand. Adam has finished the rear brake caliper. We've just made sure that the little spring plates at this end and that sit under this end down here are located properly, so that the pads are sort of retained. The pad pin's got a little bit of copper slip on it on the thread, the little lock nut things in, so that's ready to go back on the bike. Then Adam can go and do the front brake calipers, which is pretty much exactly the same routine. The only difference with these is, after the first pistons come out, obviously when you put the airline back on, the same one will want to come out again. So the trick is to put a cable tie over that piston, and then hopefully the next one pops out and the next one, and round the course. What you can do with these ones is you can actually unbolt them and split the two halves, but it doesn't really gain us anything taking it apart, and it does have the potential for the O-ring between the piston halves to sort of leak, or we pull the thread out of the other half of the caliper. So we don't really want to do that. Final touch when Adam does this is actually trying to remove this mark from the breaker's yard that we don't really want.
I don't know what language these are. I don't know where they come from.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? Some sort of hieroglyphics.
Yeah, don't know what that is.
Might be Russian.
That looks like the Arabic 1.
Does it? Oh, very nice. There are certain advantages to having Adam the apprentice here. And my favourite one so far is that I can have a tea break and eat biscuits, and work is still getting done, which is excellent. Did I not give Adam a biscuit opportunity?
I really like biscuits.
I'll get you a biscuit in a bit. Yes. Right, back to the actual bike that we're doing. Right, while Adam's doing stuff, we can do a bit of a list. So, we're going to start probably at the front. I will admit we did dive in, and before we wrote a list, we started doing the brakes. They seemed like a good place to start because being able to stop is probably more important than actually being able to go. Right, when we picked the bike up, we have had it running not for very long, and it was a little bit smoky because it hasn't been run much since the motor was built, but there you go. The engine has had a bit of a refresh. Not actually sure of the exact details of what's been changed, but it has had some attention, so it should be good to go. It could do with a bit of a clean though, because under there where you can't really see it properly for the light, it is a little bit grubby still. So that needs a little bit of TLC. To do that, it will be easier with the radiators off and maybe even the exhaust pipes off. So that's on the list. The front wheel will at some point be getting painted to match the rear wheel. The radiator will ignore, apart from it is dribbling a little bit out of this top hole that goes to the reservoir. So not the end of the wheel, it's not under pressure, but obviously it doesn't want to weep. Right, where are we going? Back here, the rear sets have a bit of corrosion and a little patina of age on them, and the bolts are horrible. So we'll just throw the bolts away and put some nice stainless ones in, give these a bit of a light buff up, make them look a little bit better. We can ignore pretty much all the bodywork because there is a full set of Chinese fairings to go on it, but the seat definitely needs some attention. Adam, what are we doing with the seat?
It's going to get revinyled.
Right, that's going to get revinyled. Okay, forks are fine, clocks are okay. I mean, it has got 46,000 kilometres on it, but, you know, we couldn't find a lower mileage set. I might change that bolt, though, because I think it looks wrong. Fairing brace is okay. Right, the tank on the outside looks lovely, but on the inside, if we look down the hole in there, it's definitely not so lovely. If you can see it, if it will focus on it, that's quite rusty. It's not deep, deep rust, but it's certainly more rusty than you'd like. So, that's going to get taken off, and then it's going to get cleaned out and sealed. So it'll be good to go. While we're there, we might peel these horrible sort of tank pad things off as well. Again, bolts and the rear sets and bits will all come apart. Rear sets will be clean. Bolts will be changed. The rear shock works, and it looks okay. So that might stay for now. And then after it's been ridden, we'll decide if it needs, well, it will want a stiffer spring, but then we'll decide if we may actually just change it for something slightly better. Because the bike's been built out of bits, finding bits that, you know, haven't been crash damage on a 400 Honda is a little bit awkward. This is really, really common. As soon as you crash them, it just dents this and marks all this up, which is a bit of a shame because it's quite obvious. I am toying with seeing if I can weld a nut on it and basically slide hammer the dent out and then polish it up and see if it looks any good, because finding a non-dented one is quite awkward. Right, silencer. Unfortunately it has a bit of a scuff on the end there, but potentially we could turn it round. The actual sleeve isn't brilliant. We need a rubber for there. And even worse, look how 90s that is. A red anodised end on your silencer to make your bike look really fast. So at the very least, we need to take the silencer off, drill the rivets out, take the end cap off and shot blast it so it's not red. But I suspect the whole silencer may just get changed for something a little bit nicer from probably Paula A16. Right, it's got a new chain of sprockets on it, the swinging arm's in decent condition, the back wheel's good. So it's not terrible, but there is a bit of work to do. Obviously we'll be checking air filters and airbox and all that stuff under here, but because Jez has built it and we've had it running, I'm not expecting anything too terrible, but obviously when we take the tank off, we can have a look underneath. So that's it. It is mostly cosmetic, and then we'll just go around and check some of the chassis bits to be sure it's safe to ride. By heck, he nearly had me fingers off. So Adam got the rear brake caliper done and it was tip-top. Then he moved on to the fronts and one piston came out happy in the first caliper and then everything else was seized solid. And in the second caliper, the first piston came out and we realised there was no dust seal underneath it, so it's presumably been seized up before and somebody's taken it apart and just taken the dust seal out to stop it dragging. So we have new seals on order. Adam may have learnt occasional things on his first day What have you learnt, Adam?
Do not stand in front of the piston coming out of the caliper if you're using an airline. It will destroy things like your fingers in your face as it ricocheted off the wall and across the workshop. So that was entertaining. And I've also learnt, if I'm a good boy, Dave feeds me biscuits.
Splendid. And on that note, we shall reconvene another day to do more on the RVF. Thanks for watching, and join us again next time when Adam finds more investment opportunities on the little Honda.